Hello, this is Justin, and this is a book review of The 4-Hour Workweek by Timothy Ferriss. If you're new to this channel, we talk about great books and inspire people to read. If you love reading and if you love great books, then subscribe to this channel and hit the bell notifications. Without further ado, let's talk about The 4-Hour Workweek. This book is about how to achieve financial freedom and location independence. It's not for people who want to work their 9-to-5 jobs until they retire. It's for people who don't want to do that. And the premise of the book is to help you to work less and live more. A lot of assumptions in this book is about the habits of the majority of people. And the majority of people are what the book calls deferrers. Deferrers defer their dreams and their life plans until they retire in their 60s and 70s. They work their 9-to-5 jobs, collect savings, and when they retire down the road, they'll live their life, but by then they're very old. This book wants to convince you to be part of the new rich, and this is a term defined in the book of people who take advantage of time and mobility to live a very different life. Instead of deferring their life plans until they're older, they live their life immediately when they become adults. And it's about scattering your retirement throughout your life. And it's not necessarily even scattering your retirement. It's about pursuing your dreams throughout your life instead of waiting until you're 60 or 70. It's about living your life right now instead of waiting until you're old to live your life. And you may be thinking, yes, but you need to save up and make money in order to live your life, and that's true. And this is what the book is trying to do. It's trying to help people create income for themselves without relying on a job or without relying on a specific location, because if you have both location mobility and the freedom to move wherever you want, it's a lot easier to live like a millionaire even without being a millionaire. So for example, an investment banker in New York City could be making $150,000 a year, but he's working 80 hours per week. Let's take another example of a blogger who's living in Buenos Aires, Argentina, which is the capital and most expensive city in Argentina. He could be making $40,000 a year and still be living a much better life than the investment banker in New York. Furthermore, he could be working 4 hours a week. And this is where the book talks about the difference between relative income and absolute income. Absolute income is the amount of money in dollar terms you make in a year, regardless of how long you work in a week or how many hours you put in. So if you do the math, the investment banker would be making $150,000 a year, but his per hour wage is only $36 per hour. So his relative income, which is just the amount of money he makes per hour, is only $36. But if you compare that to the blogger in Argentina, his relative income is $192 per hour if you do the math. So which would you prefer? And before you think about that, we should also consider the vast differences in cost of living between New York City and Buenos Aires. In New York City, in order to live an average lifestyle in Manhattan, you need at least $5,000. In Buenos Aires, the author lived there and lived a luxury lifestyle for only $1,500 a month. And that includes a penthouse in the most expensive district in Buenos Aires. That also includes maids and servants and personal security guards. It also included private Spanish lessons and private tango lessons and daily meals at 4-star or 5-star restaurants. The author also spent money on VIP service at clubs, and all of that was only $1,500 a month in Argentina. And that's a luxury millionaire lifestyle without even being a millionaire. Compare that to the investment banker in New York City who needs at least $5,000 a month to live an average lifestyle in Manhattan. So you got to ask yourself, which one would you prefer? Which option would you choose if you had the choice? The book is about getting you to the point where you can actually decide to choose one or the other. It wants people to learn more about the options they have so they can actually choose whether they want to be that blogger in Buenos Aires or that investment banker in New York City. So the 4 steps in the book to get you to the 4-hour work week is definition, elimination, automation, and liberation. Definition, we already went over that. We define the main concepts in the book. So let's get into elimination. The first thing you should know about the elimination part is that there's a difference between being effective and busy. Being busy is just doing a lot of different things. Some of them might add value to your life, some of them might not. And a lot of people who are busy tend to be pretty inefficient with managing their time, and they tend to procrastinate the important tasks and important decisions that they need to make. What's more important is being effective, and how the book defines effectiveness is actions taken to get you closer to your goals. You don't necessarily have to be working 24 hours a day or even 8 hours a day. You just have to be taking actions consistently to get you closer to your goal. And this is essential to elimination because this section is about eliminating the necessary clutter in your life and focusing on the things that matter. And that's how you get yourself to achieve your goal. The second main concept from this section is the 80-20 rule. What this concept is about is that 80% of the results you get come from 20% of the sources. For example, 80% of the profits in a business often come from just 20% of the customers or products. 80% of the problems in a business also come from just 20% of the worst customers who write bad reviews and complain to customer service all the time. So when you think about how you live your life, you need to identify the 20% of the sources that produce 80% of your success and happiness and focus on that 20%. And also identify the 20% of the influences that produce 80% of your unhappiness and try to eliminate that 20%. That could be bad friends, toxic people, negative people, and bad habits. And on the positive side, that could be the friends that add the most value to your life, the friends you feel the best connection with, and also the hobbies you do, the activities you do, and the good habits that you practice. So focus on the 20% that get you results and focus on that, and eliminate the 20% that bring you down. The third concept I found very useful in the elimination step is Parkinson's law. What this law basically says is that if you set a goal with a deadline, it will force you to accomplish that goal within that time frame. And that is very important because you need to be able to accomplish your goals in a timely basis. If you just set a goal for yourself but don't set a deadline, you will procrastinate. But having a deadline will force you to actually accomplish the goal within a reasonable time frame. And that this is assuming that the goal and the deadline are reasonable. And the extra time pressure would also force you to focus more on working towards accomplishing that goal. So that's also very helpful. The last concept I found very useful from the elimination section of the book is the low information diet, which is about cutting down useless media consumption. So this book was written in 2007. So the author mostly talked about emails and how he would batch emails together and answer them all at the same time instead of checking emails constantly throughout the day and wasting time. So what the author did was he would check and reply to emails once a week every Monday. I think that's a little too extreme. This was 2007. In 2020, that's different. We have phones, we have text messages, we have emails, and people have greater expectations for speedy response time. So I don't think once a week would work well in today's day and age. But I do think that it's important to cut down how long you. It's important to cut down on distractions, and I've already been implementing a low information diet even before I read the book, but after reading the book, I took it even further. So before I read the book, sometimes I would put my phone on airplane mode to limit notifications and distractions so I can focus on what I wanted to do. But this was pretty unplanned and haphazard. But after reading the book, I began having a more systematic process with limiting media consumption, because I find most of it pretty useless and some of it even toxic. So for most of the day, I put my phone on airplane mode. And I would only check my phone at 12 p.m., 4 p.m., and 8 p.m. to reply to texts and emails and respond to phone calls. And this has really helped me a lot because I think phone addiction today is a big problem. People are always on their phones and it wastes a lot of time. And most of the time people use on their phone is pretty wasteful. It's not used productively. So implementing this allowed me to cut all that wasteful time and focus on doing productive things. It also forced me to focus because I'm not distracted by notifications from my phone, and it made me more efficient because when I am on my phone to respond to texts and emails and phone calls and other communications, I can focus on that instead of multitasking, which is not very good. There's actually a lot of studies that show that multitasking makes you less productive than you can actually be and less efficient, because you can't really do something well if you're doing other things at the same time. If you want to do something well, you have to focus on it. So that's something I have implemented from reading the book, and I found this step very useful. Obviously, on the weekends, I'm more liberal with my phone use because I have to hang out with friends and we have to text each other and contact each other by phone. Also, before dates and appointments, I would turn on my phone or turn off airplane mode because sometimes people run late or they want to confirm the time or place. And during the day, even though my phone is mostly on airplane mode, I sometimes need to Google something and I don't have my computer with me, or I need to use Google Maps, or I need to check the weather to see if I need to wear a big jacket or not. So sometimes it's not perfect. I don't put my phone on airplane mode and only check them 12, 4, and 8 p.m. But for the most part, I keep my phone on airplane mode, and this forces me to focus. And I found this very helpful. The next step in getting you to the 4-hour work week is automation. And what this step is about is outsourcing your business and your work so that you can actually focus on living your life instead of working your business or whatever you do. And the main concept behind this is the concept of ownership. If you own a business and if you have people run your business for you, you don't need to be actively running your business. You can actually live your life. So being able to own your business is essential to creating a location-independent lifestyle and achieve financial freedom. And another concept you need to understand for this step is geo-arbitrage, which basically means that there are vast differences in costs and prices between different countries around the world. This is why a lot of businesses outsource their work overseas, because it's a lot cheaper to do that kind of work overseas. The author outsources a lot of his work to India. He put out a lot of websites, recommended websites in the book on virtual assistants you can hire in India who can manage your personal affairs and also your work life. They can do your work for you, and it's a lot cheaper than hiring someone in America because of the labor differences. Of course, this was written in 2007, so right now if you want to hire a virtual assistant in India or in another country, you should probably do your own research. But it's a very useful concept because you can outsource your work to people in a different country for a cost that is very low compared to what you would have to pay in America. And this is not just about outsourcing your personal work to assistants. You should also outsource your business work to partners and other people who can work for you. So the author talks a lot about market research, website development, marketing, finding credit card processors and fulfillment companies to run his sports supplement business, but this applies to any business overall. He goes into a lot of technical details about this, so if you're more interested in the business side, should definitely consider reading this part of the book. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but it is pretty technical, and if you actually want to do it yourself, you should read the book. And the last part of the automation step is to empower your employees and the people who work for you. When the author first tried to automate his sports supplement business, he had a lot of trouble because he would get bombarded with emails and phone calls from his partners and outsourced employees and his assistants because they didn't know how to respond to different scenarios. So what the author did was he wrote down the major scenarios and described in detail how to respond to them. But more importantly, he told them that they have the authority, explicit authority from him to make decisions as long as those decisions don't cross a $400 threshold. So he capped an amount of money that his assistants were allowed to use, and within the $400, they can make any decision as long as it furthers the goals of the business. And this is very effective because it unleashes the innate creativity and problem-solving skills of the people who work for them. So instead of micromanaging those people, he allows them to solve problems. And the author would check his business once a week. So if someone wasn't doing his job or someone was cheating, he could get rid of them. And the most he would lose is $400. And the last step to get to the 4-hour work week is liberation. This step is mostly concerned with people working at a job and want to create a remote work lifestyle or a remote work agreement. So the author talks a lot about how you can negotiate a remote work agreement. The strategy he advises is to progressively negotiate, to start small and then ask for more and more. So his strategy is to go sick for 2 days and ask your boss if you could work at home when you're sick. Of course, you would agree because you're going to be sick anyway. And to make sure that in your sick days, you're more productive than you are in your office. So when you come back from being sick, you can tell the boss, oh, I've been very productive at home because I don't have to deal with distractions in the office or have commute all the way to the office. So ask for a 2-week trial for 2 days of remote work per week. And if the boss agrees, you can work those 2 weeks with 2 days per week at home doing remote work. And the author recommends that you make sure that those 2 days when you are at home are more productive than the days you are in the office. And then you can quantify that productivity and show that to your boss to get a long-term 2-day per week remote work agreement. So once you get that, you do well, you work well, and you make sure your productivity is focused on the 2 days you are not in the office. After a while, you should ask for 4 days remote work per week and start by asking for a trial because it's easier for your boss to say yes to a trial. He recommends a 2-week trial. So same thing, make sure your productivity at home is higher than your productivity in the office. After that, if you get the 4-day per week remote work agreement, work well again, wait a while, and in the middle of a project, say you have to visit relatives and suggest that you work remotely while you're visiting relatives. And make sure that you're very productive during those 2 weeks you're with relatives. He suggests that you ask for 2 weeks for the trial period. And then once that happens, you can ask for a full-time remote work agreement. And this can be successful because you've already shown a proven track record that you can be very productive working remotely. And if that is granted, then you have your remote work agreement. He does recommend that when you ask for the full-time remote work agreement, you do so in the middle of a project, so it's harder for your boss to say no. And a lot of his examples in the book, it relies on manipulation. So that is one thing I didn't like too much about the author, but his main message is pretty useful. Another thing he talks about in the liberation step is the common fears people have with quitting their jobs and starting their own business. Fears like insurance, how they'll pay bills, and other common fears. Most of it can be pretty solvable if you create your own business, but even if you work remotely, well, actually, if you work remotely, those wouldn't be a problem. But if you start your own business, those will solve themselves out as long as you're successful. So the key point is to be successful in starting your own business so that you can actually get rid of these fears. And also, if you think about it, a career is always waiting for you. Your life is not going to wait for you because you only have a certain length of time in this world. You could live a little longer than you expected, but at the end of the day, you're only in this world temporarily, and once the time goes by, you're not going to take it back. But if you take risks, start a business, travel the world, a career is always waiting for you. So it's better to try to live your life than to take the safe path and get stuck in a 9-to-5 job until you're 60 or 70 something. The last part of the liberation step is how to live a luxurious nomadic lifestyle. It's pretty straightforward. You go to a different country, like in South America or in Eastern Europe, where the cost of living is very different than in America. And you could live like a millionaire without being a millionaire. And you could be working 4 hours per week instead of 40 hours per week. And you could be living in the best part of the city, eating at 4- or 5-star restaurants, have your servants or maids, and whenever you miss home, you can always come back to America. So that's how you live the luxurious nomadic lifestyle. And the book is about getting you to the point where you can be able to choose to do that or choose to stay at home. It's up to you, but the important thing is that you are able to choose, and the book wants you to achieve financial freedom and location independence. So that is the gist of the book. I found it a very great book, and it was very informative. It had a lot of useful information that I applied to my own life. I did find the author a little pretentious in his tone, and a lot of his advice, not a lot, but some of his advice is about misleading people and lying. For example, he would say, pretend to be busy to avoid interacting with colleagues in the office so that you can focus on whatever you're doing, or only using email once a week and giving people very long response times, which is a little rude. But for the most part, I found the book very useful, and it had a lot of great information. So if you want to read the book yourself, there's a link in the description to Amazon, so you could buy it on Amazon by clicking that link. And if you love great books, then subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Follow me on Instagram and follow me on Medium. Medium is where I post articles of book reviews. So those articles are more in depth, so you might want to read that and follow me on Medium. Yeah, like and comment and definitely subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you guys next time.